I don't think I would choose to retire, right? I would still continue to work. So I think it's really important for us to know more about what we value than the steps to reach some sort of predetermined, level by somebody else that you don't know.
I
If there's a common theme in our conversation over here today, it's the power of reflection and knowing yourself. And that is my conversation to this generation, to myself as I was about to graduate from college. If I could give myself some advice, is really invest in creating the environment that allows you to be healthy. And that only happens with knowing what makes you healthy.
Sometimes words have two meanings. Sometimes all of our thoughts are misgiven. Stairway to Heaven by Led Zeppelin. So that's why when I talk about words can control us, this is exactly what it means. Words have two meanings. Words have multiple meanings. Words have infinitely many meanings. Think about different languages. Somebody looks at an object, somebody looks at something. A turtle can mean something completely different to somebody else on the completely other side of the world, right? And so some of our thoughts are misgiven. Some of what we think we are hearing, some of what we think we might be saying is different than what might be understood. So throughout this podcast with Dr. A, I think that might be an interesting thing to think about. Something that, it's not always we see on social media. That's how it is, right? In this podcast, we'll talk specifically about, some of the current macro issues in the economy. Then we'll dive into about personal investing, about values, finding meaning, and what we can do, right? What we can do as college students, what we can do as a student of life, really. And so a little bit more about Dr. A. Dr. A is a PhD and IO in labor and public economics. He is an economist and associate dean at Northern Kentucky University's Hale College of Business and has a passion in making economics accessible and practical to help people make more informed decisions in professional and personal lives, and has very academic and practical applications. Some of the programs that he's founded are Economics with Dr. A, which he will talk about, actionable economic and financial insights throughout social media, the Econ Games international program reaching 150 students annually, transforming economic theory into hands-on experiences. And that's also something we'll talk about, which is, we have to start doing to start learning rather than being told what to do to truly understand. He also is a mentor for the Hale Fellows. He founded the Hale Fellows, a research-based mentorship program bridging academic concepts with real-world business applications. And he also founded the Research Lab, a weekly community about current economic research. So Dr. A is very well versed in economics and has a lot to say about this very topic. What is the most pressing issue you see from a macro perspective of the economy? I know that right now there's a lot of uncertainty, whether it's tariffs, right? But I think that there's always uncertainty, and it's the way we look at it. And I think that it might seem like there's a lot of uncertainty because, tariffs aren't being set in stone. Maybe it's being said that there are tariffs, and again, just now they just recently rolled back EU tariffs, so it's super flimsy. It feels like. So, what do you think is the most pressing issue in the economy right now?
Well, you hit the nail on the head. It's actually uncertainty, and if you look back at the data, and there's uncertainty indices out there for us to follow to get a quantitative measure and an objective measure of how volatile the market is, and depending on which one you're looking at, actually all of them have it right now as the highest level of uncertainty. And we know from economic theory, consumer choice, whenever you cannot know and you face uncertainty, you're more likely to do nothing. And the choice, quote unquote, the choice to do nothing is costly in the long run. So we're seeing people reduce their decisions to take on any long-term investment that might be going to college. So college enrollment will decline because of that, because people will not know what to do, but businesses as well. So we will see more short-term decision making, people making decisions just to survive and not making long-term investments. And that is going to be costly for us as a nation and as individuals. So if you want to think of it, Sean, from your own perspective, if I cannot guarantee, or base it on our historical averages of 10% return in the stock market, and you cannot feel confident about the stock market going into the next 2, 3 years, you're more likely to find alternative ways to quote unquote gamble, right? So
Mm,
we're going to
right.
see increase in sports betting by this generation. People are going to chase returns where they can't find them. So uncertainty is my biggest concern right now in the market.
And I look at the VIX for that, and that's like
Mhm.
kind of the stock ticker that I look at. If you are a college student out there wanting to know how to measure that, I guess. And there's a big concept called stagflation that I think that doesn't get talked about enough. And I think that you are very familiar with this. It's when the economy becomes stagnant, it stops growing, but then there's still inflation around, and oftentimes it leads to a recession. So should we be worried about that right now? What are you seeing from the data?
The data indicates that that is a concern. That is also Jerome Powell's concern right now going into the Fed meetings. With uncertainty and businesses slowing down, long-term investments, and individuals not spending, uh, that is going to cause the economy to slow down in its growth. But with the introduction of tariffs, prices are going to go up, and inflation, the fear is inflation is going to creep back in. And that combination is exactly how you defined it, Sean, is, a reduction in our growth rate, or even worst case, slowing down of our economy and increasing prices. And once you find yourself in a situation like that, it is hard to get out of. Stagflation is a bad place to be in, and it's a difficult place to get out of.
Often, I think issues are directly correlated. So I think right now we see that tariffs are inflationary. But what might be some indirect consequences that we might see? So I think as a college student right now, we don't have much job security. We're very worried about getting an internship, let alone get a job. It's costing much more and more to survive in life, and people are just very concerned about that. But on the same note, we aren't making proper financial decisions for our long-term goals, even though we know we should be making those decisions. So maybe I asked the wrong question. Maybe it's more about what you said about the decision making. So maybe it's how important is it to understand why we make the decisions that we do make?
Yeah, I actually love your question, and I'll tell you why it's an important question. What I processed your question to be is it's this concept of time preferences. As individuals, I have a choice between spending today, or consuming in the future. And
Mm,
as an individual, I gain satisfaction from consuming today. I'd rather consume as early as possible. So if you want me to forgo consuming today so I could consume in the future, you better pay me something to make
right,
that transition, or you have to incentivize me to make this sacrifice. And what
right,
we're seeing with this generation, and specifically, I think COVID had a lot to do with it, the future is not guaranteed. So people's purchasing habits were heavily weighted on consumption today. So they're taking the short-term decision making, spending their money today. And you're seeing, I mean, if you're on Instagram, you're seeing the same things I'm seeing, where people are saying, you know what, I'd rather not work as hard just so I could go travel. And this is part of that decision making. The other thing that's happening is our social contract with this generation has changed. It used to be, if you worked hard, you invested, you put the time in, I can safely say that you're going to have a better life than if you did not do that. That is changing, or at least the market perceives that it's
Mm.
no longer holding. So people are like, why should I put in the effort if you're not going to guarantee me a
Right.
positive outcome? So I don't want to gamble, right? They see it as a gamble. It's
Hmm.
not guaranteed. We're seeing it with college as well. Um, but I don't think that the data shows that the outcomes are positive if you sacrifice today. They might not be as high as they used to be. Or the other problem, and this brings us to the value of college. College has not done a good job of communicating its value proposition, right?
Mm.
So we're seeing more people say, I'd rather stay out and experience life and work today. I know college might give me a higher return, but I'm not 100% sure.
Mm.
The data shows that going to college pays off, at least in aggregate.
And I think I mean, colleges are getting more and more expensive, and it's getting much harder and harder to get into some top colleges. And I think that it's becoming so competitive that, to me, it seems like, I mean, I don't know if I should be saying this, but the colleges are almost like a business. They're not ran to, I mean, sure, they're the best education that you can get, and it's really amazing. I will say at Boston College,
Hmm.
top of the line education, I feel like I'm getting all the support I need. But it's getting harder and harder and harder. And sure, for me, it's great because then it's boosting the value of my degree.
Hmm.
But the fact that it's becoming harder and harder and harder, and that you basically need to be wealthy to even get into these colleges, because education costs money now, right? So if you
Yeah.
want to go to a top college, I mean, there are great public schools, but I don't know how I'd say this economically, but if you look at like agglomeration economies, or around certain public schools, there needs to be a lot of wealth for a lot of support and a lot more education. So what I'm seeing throughout, whether it's a public school or a private school, just the more wealth that's around there, the students are going to be much more supported educationally. So, and to get to the top of the top in terms of colleges, like,
Hmm.
what I'm seeing is this huge socioeconomic disparity between classes. And it's this wealth gap that's also creating this educational gap,
Yeah.
which is really having a burden on our financial decisions. And that leads me to ask, why is it so important that we educate ourselves to make better financial decisions? Because we live under capitalism, and there is no other way around it. We need to understand our financial needs and how we make money, and what money is. So again, why do you think it's so important that we educate ourselves to make better financial decisions, and how might we do that?
Yeah. I think it's important for us to educate ourselves, not just about financial decisions, but our own relationships with finances. It's really the
Mm.
psychology of money. And we actually, in this conversation, have already made this mistake several times where we say people are not making the right decision. There's
Mm.
no
Mm.
there's no right or wrong decision when it comes to finances. It is, what is the decision that you believe is best for you, right? It's such an individual. It's personal finances is personal, but yet we put this umbrella that these are the best ways to live, and that in itself negates the whole idea of it being personal. What I want my students and the people around me to know is, what are the things that they value themselves, and how are they investing to make sure the things that they value actually happen. So it's more about personal. And what I notice a lot of times, and this goes back to the college conversation, is people don't really know what they value. They don't know what they want. So you get a lot of hurting effects and hurting biases. Let's talk about going to college, since we've been talking about this. Some people don't know why they're going to the prestigious college. It's just expected of them, right? The
Right.
value of college might be equivalent at a different institution with a smaller brand name, right? So you have to figure out what's best for you. I know
Right.
some students that would succeed really well in classes with 500 students. I also know students that need a class of 20 students, right? But we don't talk about those variations. So we get a
Hmm.
lot of people doing the same thing. And, in the case of college, it makes it more selective. In some colleges, pushes demand up, and it becomes really harder minimizing the value proposition of that institution. But there's other institutions that are providing similar value for a differentiated market. But when
Mm.
it comes to personal finance as well, I mean, I see a lot of people, I'm on YouTube just like you are probably. I see all these people that want to retire by 45, and I want to know why. And
Mm.
we recently have made it this cool and sexy initiative to retire early. Well, what are
Hmm.
you going to do with the rest of your time, right? I mean, given the opportunity to retire at 45, I'm 44, so that would be next year. I don't think I would choose to retire, right? I would still continue to work. So I think it's really important for us to know more about what we value than the steps to reach some sort of predetermined, level by somebody else that you don't know.
I agree. Something that I've been saying a lot is it's understanding who you value, exactly as you're saying. And it's either in a life of, I guess, this dualism where we live for others and ourselves, who are you valuing in the decisions that you're making? And I think that's so key to actually crushing financial anxiety.
Yes.
Because once you understand who you value. So, say I value myself. If my actions are in line and benefiting who and why I'm valuing myself, well, then I have certainty in my actions and I know why I'm doing the things that I'm doing. And I can clearly and distinctly say, like, I'm actually great. I'm sticking to my thesis. This is supporting the bottom line. This is supporting me. But, when we don't understand that, when we don't understand who we're valuing, then I think we lose a lot of meaning in our actions and we don't know why we're doing the things that we're doing. And just like you said, I think that's so important. And a similar topic to what you were saying was the meaning, because you were saying that, next year, people are like, I would want to retire at 45, but, what would you do with the rest of your life? And I think it's so important to find meaning in one's job or career or whatever they're doing, regardless of if they make money or not. So, how do you find, or what are ways that people can find meaning in their career?
Yeah. Before I answer that, I want to go back to this concept of financial anxiety, and this is something that
Mm.
I've been adamant about lately.
Hmm.
We've had this initiative of increasing financial literacy, and as of yesterday, I think it was 28 states now mandate a financial literacy class in high school before you graduate. The
Really?
the problem, yeah, the
Wow.
problem with that
Awesome.
though,
Mm-hmm.
it's awesome, but the problem with that is
Uh-huh.
that most of these states are teaching it as you have to do this, you have to max out your
Oh,
retirement, you have to do it's
I see.
steps. It's not understanding the psychology of who you are and your relationship with money. So, one thing that I am seeing happen with my college students, especially the ones that have actually taken a financial literacy course, and this is not a statistical evidence, this is anecdotal evidence, is they want to know with 100% certainty the outcome of any decision they make. And
Mm.
that's what financial literacy teaches. Like you have to calculate everything, every ROI.
Mm.
But life is so uncertain. This goes back to our conversation of uncertainty. So when people can't make that decision, they end up getting stuck. It's like deer in headlights, right? And I'm seeing a generation of individuals that are scared to make a choice when uncertainty is high. And
Right.
we need to overcome that. And this goes back to now to this question of how do you find what you are good at or what you're passionate about in life? The only way to do that is through experiential learning. The only way to learn about that is through learning by doing. You are going to have to roll your sleeves up, go out there, do work that you love as much as do work that you hate, right?
Exactly.
You're going to have to put yourself in uncomfortable situations. You're going to have to fail. And that's what we're not teaching people. How do you overcome failure? Because I could guarantee you, Sean, I don't know you that well, but I guarantee you you're going to fail one day in your life,
Oh
right?
yeah.
I
Plenty of
have
times.
failed many times. But learning how to pick yourself up and think of it as an experience and not the end of your life is a valuable lesson that you cannot learn through textbooks. You cannot learn through, I mean, you could learn about it in team projects and teamwork and things of that sort, but it's what we need to teach and present to our students more and more these days because it's what's missing in the market. Everybody's scared to fail.
So I agree with you. And on this podcast, I talk a lot about you need to go do, you need to go fail. And it's not about trying to fail, but it's trying to succeed so well or so do the best that you can that you put yourself in an uncomfortable position because you've never been there before. And then once you keep doing that, you get used to it and you go higher and higher and higher. But one thing that I've been trying to understand was, well, then I feel like it's not just you and I that understand this concept and that other people also do, but why is it so hard for us to learn something like this? And just it goes in a circle for me. It's like you need to go experience it to learn something like this. And so, and I think it's a lot easier or straightforward, I guess, for people to follow a structure. Okay, this is what you need to learn by this time. We're going to take a test. So just a textbook learning kind of thing. But what are ways that you might think, I mean, you're a professor, to put your students out in the real world and I guess go fail, but not meaning to go fail? What are some ways that we can start doing this?
So one of the reasons that we don't have a culture of embracing failure is because the people around you want to protect you from failure. Your parents, and it's all coming from great places. Your parents, your immediate teachers, they want to protect you. We've created this bubble around the people that we love the most because, for all of us, it's easy to say, oh, I want the rest of this, the population to fail and struggle. But when it comes to my own, oh, let me put all of the boundaries and the, bubble wrap around. And, there's this fantastic book called The Anxious Generation. I highly recommend that you read it if you haven't. So that's why it exists. And it's coming from a good place. But we need to take a little bit of that safety net off and provide it when actual failure happens. So rather than creating a safety net before the failure happens, let people fail and then pick them up. And that's how we try to do it, at least with our students here. I'm a founder of a program called the Econ Games, and the Econ Games is really, think of it as a 24-hour hackathon around an economic problem. And we bring students from across the nation, and they meet with a real-world employer facing a real-world problem, and they give them a data set, and they give them the prompt, and they say, you have 24 hours to come up with a solution. And everybody has to present, right? And it's high stakes, it's nerve-wracking, but that's exactly what we want. And during the process, everybody's scared about their presentation and what if they fail. And somewhere halfway through the mark of the program, 12 hours in, students start to say, you know what, I'm really proud of this work. I don't know what other people are doing, but I can't wait to show what I have done, right? You have to put people into that environment where they confront that feeling of uncomfortableness. I might fail, but I have to overcome it. There's no way for me to run out of here, right? I am stuck with the other 150 students over here. We're all going to have to show up. And if that's the case, then I'm just going to shoot my shot. And we have to get to that part. I always actually was talking to my wife yesterday, next month is 5-year anniversary of me starting a YouTube channel.
Congrats, man. Awesome. That's awesome.
Thank you. I have a PhD. I've done well academically, but one of my biggest successes and the things that have really shaped who I am was trying to build a social media brand. Because I'm 5 years in, I think I should have millions of followers. I only have 17,000 subscribers on YouTube, right? Thank you. I only have 17,000 subscribers on YouTube. On Instagram, I think it's like 3,000 followers. But through the past 5 years, it's been building in public. It's let me try this. And my students watch me try and fail at things. And it actually builds a stronger loyalty because they are following that journey. So
Right.
we need to teach people how to build a journey rather
Mm-hmm.
than focus on the outcomes.
Mm.
Outcomes will happen if we're fully invested in the journey. But right now, we're only invested in the outcome. We're not invested in the journey.
Mm. So shifting over a little bit, I think so in on your YouTube channel you talk about emotions, you talk about burnout, right? So how do you think our emotions are tied to our financial decisions? Are emotions to blame? How do you think emotions affect financial decisions, good or bad?
Yeah, emotions are huge in financial decision making, and I wish more people focused on that. I mean, we have a whole field of economics called behavioral economics and behavioral finance, which look at where these biases or behavioral items persist in your decision making. But to make it more personal, I try not to make any financial decision when I'm tired. Okay.
Mm.
I know personally my prime working hours, like you, Sean, I wake up at 4 a.m., right? Between 4 and 6 a.m., that's me time. I'm in my head, I'm writing, I am expressing, producing things because I need to do that to be in a good, safe psychological space to take on the day. I
Right.
have to get a workout in, right? In my household, we have this rule: no talking before the workout, because we
Mm.
know no decisions are going to be optimal if we haven't gotten our blood flowing and gotten our workout in. Then my day really starts after my workout, after my shower. So 7:30ish, 8ish, that's when I am now in optimal financial decision making. This is where I make my toughest decisions between usually 8:15 till about 2:30, 3 o'clock. I know no good decisions are going to happen after 3 o'clock. But I've learned that about myself. I've invested. I've had some bad mistakes happen. So in my schedule, after 3 o'clock, it's usually low stake conversations, emails, things that are on my task list that I could knock out and get through the day. But it required me to understand my own financial psychology. In my household, we call it cognitive overload. So if there's a big decision that has to be made at 5:30 p.m., say it's cognitive overload time. Let's revisit this tomorrow morning. We know,
Awesome.
right? So I encourage people to really invest in knowing who they are. And this is another thing. If you're on social media, you'll see all these people that talk about you're only great if you wake up at 4 a.m. But what they don't tell you is by 8 p.m. you're pooped, right? So
Yeah.
you just need to, you're just shifting your hours. I don't care what hours you work as long as you know what your optimal hours are.
That's so cool to me. I think that sets a great example. And it's not like you see these influencers on social media, or like you were saying, and it's just because somebody else does it and they're successful doesn't mean that you will too, doesn't mean that it'll work for you. I often see I was into health, super into health, and it was always like, oh, take this one magic supplement and you will be ripped. You will gain, I don't know, this amount of muscle, right? Because it worked for me, it'll work for you in this amount of days. And when people see the before and after, they're like, oh, it's that instantaneous. When they correlate the before and after so instantaneously online, and so they think that whatever it's going to work for you, it's going to work for me. And I think that's so important to understanding who you are from a bunch of different perspectives, whether it's financial, whether it's educational, whether it's a health perspective, whether you play music, right? There's a bunch of different lenses that you should understand yourself through, and especially financial. So that is really cool. Credits to you. And you talk about burnout. Control.
Mhm.
So controlling your emotions because volatility is here to stay. I think that was one thing you said in your YouTube video called Burnout. So why do you think that you're able to control your emotions?
I think feeling emotions is healthy. Okay.
Mhm.
I don't want to ever tell anybody, and now we're getting out of my area of expertise
Mhm.
and more
Mhm.
into an area of me talking out of just my own personal experiences. So I want to be clear about that. So I don't think I can control my emotions. I can control the environment in which my emotions
Mm,
exist.
mhm.
And I also want to say that it is totally normal to feel emotions. And I worry about this. Um, uh, what's the name of the book? Of Men and Boys, I think, or Men, of Boys and Men is another good
Boys and
book.
men,
And
I
it's,
think. Yeah.
yeah, Boys and
Hmm.
Men. It's, especially for males, we've created this culture of showing vulnerability is not healthy or is not good or is not optimal. And we're human beings. We're going to feel emotions. And what we need to figure out is how to process emotions and not necessarily to, hide them, but to work through them. If there's a common theme in our conversation over here today, it's the power of reflection and knowing yourself. And that is my conversation to this generation, to myself as I was about to graduate from college. If I could give myself some advice, is really invest in creating the environment that allows you to be healthy, and that only happens with knowing what makes you healthy. So I don't think we should be controlling our emotions. We should be controlling our environment to allow us to be the best, represent who we are at our best.
Awesome. I think one thing we talk a lot about, well, my whole podcast is about how emotions affect financial decisions, good or bad. And exactly as you said, I think it's not about controlling your emotions, it's about understanding them. Because once you can understand what emotions you might have towards how you feel, or the emotions that you have towards what you do, well, then you can understand exactly as you said earlier with maybe I don't make good financial decisions at this time because I haven't got my workout. I feel this emotion. I need to work out and to, I don't know, feel more calm or at ease. I don't know. It depends on the person, right? But I think that it's so important to understand your emotions and why you feel those emotions and for who you feel those emotions, to better understand yourself ultimately. So, when balancing our financial decisions and trajectory with our career, how do we find meaning in our jobs while it's also a means of our survival?
Yeah. That's such a difficult question. I will tell you my personal experience and how I found meaning in what I do. I am of the generation or school of thought that believes that if you do what you love, you never have to work a day in your life. And I truly love what I do. But here's the trick: what I love, the work that I love, has evolved through time. So if you had met me 10 years ago, I would have told you something. I would have answered that question very differently than I would today. So I don't think you need to find the one thing that you love. I think you need to find the next thing that you love and fully commit into it and know and create options in life. My goal with my mentees and my students is I want them to have more choices of what to do next than they know what to do with. Because having choices will then force them to figure out what matters to them.
Mm,
And if you have only one choice of a job, then that's the job I'm going to take. And you're going to be like, I just got this job. It pays me $70,000 a year. I'm working 9 to 5. And you look at it in a mundane view. But what if I gave you three possibilities? Now, the job that you pick, you're going to evaluate it through a cost benefit analysis, and you're going to say, this one's the best one for me. And you're going to be fully bought into that experience, and you're going to value it more than if you did not have any choices. So do what you love, whatever your passion is, learn that industry. So I'm working on a video right now about what advice you need to succeed in life. Whatever it is you're doing, if you're going to be a podcaster, Sean, you need to study podcasting. You need to know everything about podcasting. Best mic, what time's good to upload, what are the platforms, what are the new trends, and that becomes your life.
right.
And if you're fully committed to that journey, then the next opportunity when it comes open is going to be probably adjacent to it. And now
Mhm.
you could flex your podcasting muscle into this new arena that allows you to shine.
So, I've been having problems with this same question. I think it's one you can't really find an answer to. But what I'm seeing is that people need to be more specialized and find what they want to do earlier and earlier and earlier and be the best at it, right? So when I look at investment bankers, right, they that freshman year, they need to know what they're doing because the recruiting for 2 years from then is like a semester away. Like it happens in the fall for freshmen. It's ridiculous. And so that's where I ask some of these, my peers, and I'm like, why do you want to be an investment banker?
Mhm.
And a lot of their answers are, well, I look at who's successful, and the people that are successful to them are the people that make a lot of money as investment bankers. But the question that they aren't able to answer is then, what does success mean to you? And so I think that's so important. And I don't know, what do you think about that? What do you think? I think that a lot of people are losing meaning because they think success is all about money or what other people think. But why is it important that we have some intrinsic value of what we're doing and why?
Yeah, so great point. But to find intrinsic value is
Mhm.
actually work. You don't know what you value until you actually start to invest in it. And that's what's missing. Goes back to our initial part of the conversation. There's this phrase, you cannot create before you imitate, right?
Mm.
So go out there, figure out, see an investment banker that you're really, is doing really well. Figure out what makes them the best and then try to
Mm.
replicate it and then try to make it your own innovative way of doing things. So I don't have a problem with people saying, looking at the stars and saying, I want to be a star as well.
Right.
But in your pursuit of being a star, you have to look at all the stars that failed, right? You have to understand what made that person shine and how they leveraged it. Was it luck, right? You talk about all these stars that just were, had an extra dose of luck. You need to be able to identify that market and be able to navigate it. Saying I want to be, the best investment banker is not sufficient. How you're going to be the best investment banker is most important.
Awesome. Well, thank you for all the time that you spent talking with me today. And thank you for coming on the podcast.
Thank you, Sean. I really appreciate your time.